Hello and welcome. We are at the 48th annual meeting for the Asian Development Bank here in Azerbaijan in Baku. Today I am joined by Bambang Brodjonegoro, who is the finance minister for Indonesia. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
So first of all, if you had to single out a specific policy reform that you think is the most important reform that you and your team have been working on since the beginning of your mandate, what would that be?
I think clearly it's a budget reform in which we have to tackle the issue of the revenue, because in the revenue side we still have problem with the relatively low revenue compared to our GDP, for example. On the expenditure side, of course, the fuel subsidy reform is a start, but still we need to improve the quality of expenditure. And in terms of financing, we should find out the right formula to make sure that we get enough financing, but at the same time, it's not putting our economy at the risk of the global volatility.
And in terms of the banking sector in Indonesia, many argue it is one of the most protectionist in the ASEAN economic community. So first of all, do you agree? And second of all, in the face of the banking sector liberalization that the ASEAN economic community wants to push for, how is Indonesia going to approach this?
Well, I think I have to correct your statement. Actually, our banking sector is the most liberal in ASEAN. For example, there are major banks in Indonesia owned majority by the foreign shareholder. And even some of the Singapore banks and Malaysian bank already have their banks in Indonesia. So I don't think we are actually the least protectionist. And actually the most protectionist actually is our neighbors in ASEAN, unfortunately. So in terms of liberalizing, I think once we can agree with the ASEAN banking integration framework, we are okay with that.
I'm referring mainly to after my trip in Jakarta. A lot of the banks were pointing out to the law that limits investors to 40% of ownership in banks.
Even start discussion about the law. Right. It's just maybe in somebody's mind, but never being discussed in the formal term.
And do you think this will be, the 40% limit will be discussed or maybe changed in the future?
I don't think it will happen.
In terms of the banking sector in Indonesia and let's say the overall balance sheet, some of the banks I met with were telling me, I think we might not be deep enough in terms of meeting the 7 to 8% GDP growth target that President Joko Widodo wants to achieve. So do you think that the banking sector still needs deepening, and how are the best ways to do this?
Yeah, I think financial market deepening, especially in banking sector, is still very important. Is it in the top on our agenda? And to be honest, we haven't done our homework in that area. So clearly it's very, very important. And secondly, as we discussed just briefly, we need more foreign investment in the banking and financial sector in general. So I think that's the strategy to increase the capacity of financing for increasing GDP growth to 7%. Yeah.
And lastly, I guess one of the big themes that everyone talks about when referring to Indonesia is that the opposition still holds majority seats in parliament. Now, specifically to your team as the finance minister and also for the new government, I mean, how big of a hurdle is this and how has it affected your work so far?
At least we have passed our first exam when we successfully passed the revised budget of 2015 within 1 month, which is the period of discussing the revised budget, and with the full support of Parliament, because our initial proposal is almost the same with the final result after the discussion. And we believe in the future agendas. I think we always build a so-called communication with Parliament, although maybe they are coming from the so-called opposite side, but they are always open for a good communication as long as we have good argument and we can come up with a good proposal. Yeah.
So, well, thank you very much for your time. Indonesia is arguably one of the most interesting countries in ASEAN, so good luck with all your work.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.